Yet another shooting hits the Seattle Occupy protest zone, so we'll talk a bit about that coming up today here. Washington Post does its best to stick its own foot back into its own proverbial mouth. We'll talk a bit about that. Florida bars are closed again, and Mike Henry is out, adding to the list of people who can no longer voice black characters on cartoons. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning and welcome to Contemporary. I'm Jay Edgar, and we've got a bunch to get to today. If I can get my microphone positioned to a point where you can actually hear me, we've got so much here. I've got a massive block. You can see it right up here of just Daily Wire, where they actually did journalism, and it was great. It wasn't just commentary. They actually did something that was worth reading, so we can't let that go undone. So we'll talk a bit about that coming up here. A little bit of CNN at the end, and a little bit of Fox interspersed, and we even talk about the Washington Post. So hang tight. It's going to be a long one, but this was quite the weekend, and it was not the weekend for me to just turn off the news and forget about it, that's for sure. But we'll get by anyway. But before we get started, head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedomscoop.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary needs. We have got the Generational Gap, the R-Rated Conservative, the Freckles and Brit Show. We've got Wyatt Birkenhoff and Stephen Ignoramus. Come over there and check us out and go and check out our swag while we get down and figure out why some of our creators aren't popping up on here. So go ahead, head on over there and check us out. So to start off with, we'll look at the stocks from Friday before we look into the futures that happened over the weekend, and they're about to open back up. Looks like we had ourselves a little bit of a slide throughout Friday, but I mean, you can't imagine why if you're looking at the way the news is going today, and they're ready to shove that fear porn back down your throat and say, hey, don't go back out. We want to drop the economy again, so don't go back out. Coronavirus is going to get you. It's going to get you. It's going to get you. So we'll see what all happens there. And I mean, I'm going to go to work every day most likely, but we'll see how that works. So let's head on over and see what the investors have to say from Investors Business Daily. Dow Jones futures jumped 275 points amid surging coronavirus cases. Boeing soars 7% while Facebook tumbles because Facebook sucks. And we're streaming to Facebook and it still sucks. This is from Scott Latonin. Dow futures jumped more than 275 points amid surging coronavirus cases ahead of the open on Monday. As the current stock market pullback continues, S&P 500 futures and NASDAQ futures were also higher early Monday. Dow Jones stock Boeing soared 7% on MaxJet news, while Facebook tumbled over 3%. Bye-bye. Blue chip stocks Apple and Microsoft were higher today ahead of the open. Dow Jones stock Boeing soared on 737 MaxJet news. That was probably not 737, that's 737. Nike moved up about 0.3% among Dow 30 stocks after Friday's sell-off. Stocks to watch Monday include IBD leaderboard stocks, Facebook, and Netflix. The Dow Jones futures gained 1.2% versus fair value ahead of the open on Monday, while S&P 500 futures rallied 0.9%. NASDAQ 100 futures advanced 0.45% versus fair value. The coronavirus outbreak continues to spread across the U.S. According to Worldometer data tracker, the cumulative number of confirmed U.S. cases exceeded 2.6 million over the weekend. On Friday, the daily new cases topped 47,000, setting a new one-day record. On Sunday, daily new cases rose more than 40,000 for a fourth straight day. However, while daily new cases continue to surge, there hasn't been a corresponding rise in the number of daily deaths, a key metric to monitor. And that, my friends, that right there is what you need to pay attention to, that CNN and WAPO and New York Times and Fox and all these other bullshit websites won't tell you. That is the metric right there. We are not seeing an uptick in deaths. We're just seeing an uptick in cases, which could be both attributed to younger people getting it more often, not elder people, more of the healthy people getting it and can survive it, and an increase in testing, because test is the new thing that everybody wants to preach to you in all these states. So test. Figure out how many people actually had it. I believe and I can't quote on this right now. I'm going to research this for Ed's World later on tonight, but they're testing for antibodies and bumping the caseload up even more. So, yeah. They won't tell you about the deaths now because it doesn't fit the narrative, but think about those cases. The cumulative total of COVID-19 cases confirmed since the start of the outbreak worldwide topped 10 million over the weekend, with more than 500,000 virus-related deaths. Within the coronavirus stock market rally, the tech-heavy NASDAQ is up 8.7% for the year through Friday's close. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average are down 6.9% and 12.3% year-to-date through the June 25th close. According to IBD's The Big Picture, the coronavirus stock market rally remains in an uptrend after rebounding from lows over 3 months ago on March 23rd. The major stock indices confirmed the rebound as a new uptrend on April 2nd. Per Friday's The Big Picture, a rash of new coronavirus cases in mainly southern and southwestern states dominated news headlines in the past week. Really? Because I thought it was still protests on the CHOP. And Friday's stock market drop reaffirmed the world's number one economy is hardly showing any immunity to the most powerful virus in decades. Fact check false. Stocks to watch include the top stocks on IBD long-term leaders. The IBD long-term leaders list focuses on companies with stable earnings growth and price performance. So that's what Investors Business Daily is telling us on the Dow. But I mean, there's plenty to watch here, and as they didn't say in this particular article, futures don't necessarily correlate to trading on the next regular session, so watch what's going to happen today. All right, let's keep going here from CNBC. No, I'm not going to turn my ad blocker off for you. 5 things to know before the stock market opens on Monday from Matthew J. Belvedere. Dow futures pointing to an over 250-point gain on Monday's open, a small bounce after the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged 730 points or 2.8% on Friday, knocking the blue chips down 3.3% last week. Following initial declines overnight, stock futures turned higher early Monday despite the surging U.S. coronavirus cases. The Dow, with 2 days left in June, could break its 2-month winning streak. However, the benchmark as of Friday's close was up just over 14% for the second quarter. The holiday-shortened week ahead on Wall Street brings pending home sales Monday and S&P Chase Shiller home prices on Tuesday. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin testify before the House Financial Services Committee on Tuesday. The ADP's private sector jobs report is out on Wednesday, 1 day early. On Thursday, the government reports its June employment report. The stock market is closed Friday, July 3rd, in observance of Independence Day. Shares of Gilead up 14% this year as Friday's close were rising more than 2% in Monday's pre-market trading after the biopharmaceutical giant set pricing for its remdesivir antiviral COVID-19 treatment. Developed world governments will pay $390 per dose, with privately insured patients charged $520 per dose. Or you can get a $10 dose of hydroxychloroquine and not have to worry about it. But no, the news is going to tell you that's bad. We've got to build up remdesivir. Florida, Texas will pull back part of their reopening plans. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on, so we'll skip that for now. Record-breaking daily cases pushed the U.S. infections to nearly 2.55 million. We talked a bit about that in the last article. Shale pioneer Chesapeake Energy files for bankruptcy. Chesapeake Energy, a pioneer in the U.S. shale revolution, filed for bankruptcy protection Sunday, as the company and industry more broadly has been rocked by a drop in oil and gas prices during the coronavirus pandemic. The heavily indebted Chesapeake has been in trouble for some time, saying in May that it had concerns regarding its long-term viability. At its peak, Chesapeake had 175 operating rigs, with operations across the U.S., including in Texas, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. However, the company took on significant debt to fuel its rapid extension. Chesapeake's downturn is not unique. Whiting Petroleum, another once great driller, filed for bankruptcy protection in April. And lastly, the other thing that we looked at in the last article, Boeing, FAA reportedly to begin 737 MAX test flights. So Boeing is going to try and replace some of these airplanes in the middle of people not wanting to fly on airplanes. And we think it'll hold them up. So That's what we're going to see here in the stock market. So let's have a look into the rest of the news. All right, let's see here from Fox News. Latest Seattle chop shooting sees at least 2 injured, police say, from Danielle Wallace. So we're not out of the woods yet on violence in that area. Let's see what we've got here. Seattle police said Monday officers are investigating a shooting near the area protesters are calling the Capitol Hill Organized Protest Zone, or CHOP, because if it's an autonomous zone, then they can't get their welfare from the state government. 2 males suffering gunshot wounds arrived at Harborview Medical Center's emergency department. They are both in critical condition. Susan Gregg, a hospital spokeswoman, told Fox News. The first male arrived at around 6:15 a.m. by private vehicle, followed by the second male about 15 minutes later via Seattle Fire Department medics. The Seattle Police Department said officers are investigating a shooting near 12th Avenue and Pike Street where 2 people were reported injured. That corner is about 2 blocks away from Cal Anderson Park, where protesters initially camped out in tents to occupy the area first referred to as the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. The encampment has become more difficult to manage, drawing violence and large homeless population since the onset of occupation 3 weeks ago. Organizers on Sunday said they're seeking to move into the abandoned East Precinct where most protest leadership have already taken up shelter. As part of an effort to secure their bargaining chip in convincing city officials to act on police reform and other demands, the Seattle Times reported. Or, alternatively, you're all going to gather up into one place where you can easily be stormed and taken. Because, yeah, you are sitting on city property at this point, and that is an act of war as far as I can see. This is not the first shooting linked to the CHOP. The first and only fatality was recorded on June 20th when a 19-year-old protester was shot around 2:30 a.m. near Cal Anderson Park on 10th Avenue and East Pine Street inside the area, referred to as the CHOP. Another man was injured on the incident. Officers attempted to locate a shooting victim, but were met with a violent crowd that prevented officers safe access to the victims, the Seattle Police Department said in a press release. Officers were later informed that the victims, both males, had been transported to Harborview Medical Facility by CHOP medics. It continued, officers reported to Harborview and were informed that one of the victims, a 19-year-old male, had died from the injuries. So, yeah, they're not ready to give that up yet, even though Durkin says it's over, so it's time for Inslee to make the call. And time for the rest of us to get some popcorn and watch. But I do love the fact that right here on this article, they made sure to put medics in quotation marks because they're just a bunch of kids role-playing into a revolution. And, for me, it's kind of interesting to watch. It's kind of interesting to see as we're going into this because as we're going into this, I've thought about this numerous times. And, peaceful secession is something that I do advocate for because I think we're getting there and it's getting to a point where we may have to do this in order to keep going. Or at least, let California secede and most people will flock there. We don't have to go into 2 full separate countries like they did for the Civil War. But the other thing with the Civil War, and even for having California secession at this point, this autonomous zone was never autonomous. It was a small, landlocked nation, we'll call it that had no real natural resources or manufacturing of its own. It had no way to make money. It had no way to create anything for its residents or anything to trade with the United States or the world. And furthermore, the most dangerous part of them doing this was the fact that they were landlocked. That was the worst decision they made, was to go landlocked instead of taking a harbor, which, if I was going to secede in something that small, I would have taken a harbor. Because then I can trade with the outside world. I can go out and ask Japan for help, or South Korea maybe. Or maybe I'll sell my soul to North Korea. Either way, you've got the ability. Yes, it's unlikely that anybody's going to have a boat to run with that if they're doing something like that, but they're not against taking stuff by force, so that's something else to keep in mind as they go along. So, yeah, they were doomed to fail from the start. Absolutely were doomed to fail from the start. When the South seceded, they at least had ports and the ability to trade with Europe, Africa, and everybody else around the world. They could trade by sea. The Chaz couldn't do that. They had no airport. No ports, no nothing. Nothing in, nothing out. I would have cut power to there immediately and cut off their food supply. But, they're going to hole up in the East Brunswick now, and I don't predict that ending very well for any of them. All right, let's keep going here from the Daily Wire. Activists set up guillotine in front of Jeff Bezos' DC home, call for Amazon to be abolished. Hey, Insatiable, if you're still in here, I'm guessing this is right up your alley. This is from Daily Wire News. Fringe activists set up a guillotine in front of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos' home in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, where they reportedly demanded that Amazon be abolished. One of the demonstrators said on Bullhorn in front of Bezos' home, "It is still exploitation. When they become threatened, we have no voice but the knives come out." The guillotine that was set up in front of Bezos' home had a sign in front of it that stated, "Support our poor communities, not our wealthy men." And some more tweets that went along with it. The event appears to have been held by a group called Abolish the Present, Reconstruct the Future. The event comes as demonstrators have increasingly targeted residential neighborhoods to conduct their events, especially wealthy neighborhoods. Over the weekend, Black Lives Matter demonstrators marched through a residential area in Beverly Hills chanting "Eat the Rich" and "Abolish Capitalism Now." Hey, I wonder what these Hollywood celebrities are thinking about that. Eventually, law enforcement officials intervened and arrested those participating in the unlawful demonstration. On Sunday, demonstrators in St. Louis, Missouri attempted to march through a private gated community, but were met by heavily armed homeowners who guarded their property. Yeah, we've got an article on that one a little bit later on, too. Protests and riots have broken out across the U.S. in response to the death of George Floyd. The rioting has resulted in looting, attacks on law enforcement officials, vandalism of churches, and the destruction of statues and monuments. As the Daily Wire reported last week, rioters have destroyed statues of former Presidents Washington, Jefferson, Grant, and attempted to destroy the statue of former President Jackson before being stopped by law enforcement. So they're getting out of their own neighborhoods, which they've destroyed them to the point they're unlivable anyway, which, to be fair, some of them were unlivable to begin with. Namely, the one that I used to live in. But that's another story for another time here. But yeah, they're going to go out and, well, first they're going to start going into the safe gated communities in the inner city, like Beverly Hills. Well, it's not really inner city, but you know what I mean. It's still urban area, urban sprawl, and in St. Louis, but they're going to try and take the rural areas too, and I am going to laugh. I'm going to laugh when they try and take the rural areas and figure out what deer hunters keep in their homes. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch, and I do hope to see this keep going. And I think I'm going to buy some more stuff from Amazon today. All right, let's keep going here from the Washington Post, archived to get around their subscription service. Arguments break out by statue of Abraham Lincoln in D.C. Park. This is from Clarence Williams and Hannah Nattinson. And we've already got the safety check on Stephen Ignoramus, so don't worry about that. Fierce arguments broke out by a statue of Abraham Lincoln in the nation's capital on Friday as dozens of protesters hoping to remove it confronted a handful of people eager to defend the monument. The Emancipation in Memorial Park in Lincoln Park. I'm sorry, I read that completely wrong. The Emancipation Memorial in Lincoln Park, which depicts an African-American man kneeling at the feet of the President Lincoln, has emerged as a flashpoint during the ongoing protests over the killing of George Floyd. Earlier this week, some demonstrators vowed to remove the statue, arguing it promotes white supremacy and ignores the pivotal role slaves played in fighting for their own freedom. But others, including prominent African-American historians, have pointed out that the statue was commissioned and paid for by a group of African-Americans. On Friday evening, conflicts between demonstrators, many of whom wielding dueling bullhorns, took the form of a generational fight. Older black residents argued the statue should stay up because its removal would erase an important chapter in the history of African Americans. Younger black protesters, who have been brainwashed by the system and poor teaching in Marxism, however, shouted back that the monument is demeaning and must be pulled down. As the conversation turned increasingly heated and profane, some young people suggested the monument should be burned too. Several dozen officers with the U.S. Park Police and the D.C. Police watched the arguments, mostly without interfering. They stood spread up throughout Lincoln Park's grassy lawns, apparently ready to protect the statue, which federal D.C. law enforcement had encircled with protective metal fencing the day before. Close to 8 p.m., and this is the reason this came up to my attention entirely, demonstrators chased Jack Posobiec, an ultra-conservative commentator and Trump supporter who frequently advocates conspiracy theories from the park. Posobiec had wandered near the base of the monument, spurring some demonstrators to yell obscenities, call him a Nazi, and urge him to leave the city. A dozen protesters shoved and chased Posobiec into a side street. After a couple minutes of tense yelling, a police van pulled up and officers spilled out to form a protective line around Posobiec. Despite officers' insistence they leave Posobiec alone, a handful of demonstrators remained for a while longer, yelling obscenities. Police pushed at least one protester to the ground before helping Posobiec into the van and driving away. So, yeah, I mean, nobody's safe here. And, I mean, immediately, I did think too, because I found this in the morning after. I immediately went to look and make sure Stephen was okay, and he had already messaged me the next morning. So, it was for an unrelated topic, but I knew he was safe. So Stephen is safe, Posobiec is apparently safe at this point, and Lincoln is not. So this is interesting to me, the fact that they keep doing this, that they want to pull down all of history at this point. I don't know what the underlying purpose is. I know that these people have been told that this is just a symbol of racism, but there's got to be an underlying purpose to this. And I can't quite put my finger on it. I've got a couple ideas, but I can't quite put my finger on it. So let's keep going here. Thanks for Archive today for making sure I can get around the blocker for subscription for that. All right, St. Louis couple drew weapons on protesters headed to mayor's house. Report. A married couple brandished firearms at protesters marching through their upscale St. Louis neighborhood. A married couple brandished firearms at a group of protesters who marched through their upscale St. Louis neighborhood on Sunday on their way home, to the home of Mayor Lyda Cruson. The male homeowner stood barefoot in his Renaissance-style porch on the central West End neighborhood while carrying a semi-automatic weapon around 6 p.m. local time, while his wife pointed a pistol at the gathering. Just a note for people who aren't gun savvy, the pistol was semi-automatic too. You dumb shits. And you're the ones that want to control firearms. The couple confronted the group of about 300 protesters after they breached a gate in the neighborhood, according to a local NBC affiliate. A video on Twitter showed the woman point a firearm at passing protesters while shouting. A protester wearing a t-shirt that read "Hands Up, Don't Shoot" urged participants to relocate into the street in an attempt to defuse the situation. The protesters were en route to Mayor Cruzan's home to demand her resignation after she released the names and addresses of residents who suggested defunding the police department, the report said, legally, by the way, under Missouri's Sunshine Law, so keep that in mind. The mayor was acting fully within Missouri law. And there's the couple right there. The woman she does have her pistol out. It's just hard to see because it's such a small picture. But yeah, the gentleman has got his semi-automatic rifle. They don't know what that word means, but he's got this black, scary composite parts rifle sitting out there. But yeah, absolutely. You are your own first line of defense. I know I've seen some people walking around saying this is possibly the first time these people have ever held weapons, which, looking at their trigger discipline and the way that they're standing, I could see that, absolutely, but I would be scared if I saw that. The couple's Midwestern Palazzo home was featured in the St. Louis Magazine in August 2018 after they completed a major renovation. In the last piece, they showed off their dome-gilt ceiling and curved double staircase of marble, leading to the second and third floor landings. So, yeah. They're trying to defend the governor. I don't know why. But the governor was acting legally in all of this, and these people have clearly never held a weapon in their lives. But at least they're trying. Alright, let's keep going here. I've got a tweet, and then I've got the article that corresponds with it. Archived, of course, because they took it down. Comfortably Smug tweets, everyone laugh at the Amazon Post, because the brief from Amazon Post, screenshotted of course instead of retweeted because the tweet came down as well. Trump keeps claiming that the Post, or the most dangerous cities in America, are all run by Democrats. They aren't. Showing the graph here that the most violent crime cities, you've got 20 cities here and 17 of them are run by Democrats, but because he said all, that's going to be the problem, the big problem. And San Antonio, Las Vegas, and Jacksonville are run by independents and a Republican. And then per capita, they did the same thing here and found, oh my God, Springfield is run by an independent. So the all. He lied. He said all of them. All right, let's see what WAPO had to say on this. Archived, of course. Trump keeps claiming that the most dangerous city in America are all run by Democrats. They aren't. From Philip Bump, with the economy hobbled by the coronavirus pandemic and protesters in the street targeting America's systemic racism, President Trump has been forced to revise his re-election strategy that was once going to be triumphal declaration of his effectiveness at keeping the economy afloat, has been reworked as a reiteration of his 2016 run, a focus on making America great, and more specifically on law and order. Over and over, Trump has shared that terse phrase with his tens of millions of Twitter followers, including on Wednesday and Thursday, and over he has tried to imply that Democrats broadly, and former Vice President Joe Biden specifically, are soft on crime. That his likely general election opponent and other leaders in the Democratic Party are happy to have social structures collapse in anarchy for some unclear reason. Well, it's an election year, keep that in mind. To make that case, Trump has repeatedly lifted up a statistical factoid, as he did during an event at the White House on Wednesday. You hear about certain places, like Chicago, and you hear about what's going on in Detroit and other cities, all Democrat run, he said. Every one of them is a Democrat run, 20 out of 20, the 20 worst, the 20 most dangerous, the worst, the absolute worst, I'm telling you, I know the worst, are Democrat run. It's not clear how Trump is defining most dangerous in this context, so let's look at two related sets of data compiled by the FBI, the most violent crime and most violent crime per capita. The most recent data to that effect is from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report covering the first half of 2019. The cities with the most violent crime are many of the most populous cities in the country, as you might expect. Those with the highest rates of violent crime are from a range of different states. So, and we look at the graph, and like I said, I don't understand why you would go and prove your opponent's own point, because, I mean, this is not objective at any point. These are definite opponents of the president, but, I mean, the numbers don't lie. Yes, okay, he said all. I understand that, and I understand that's a big problem for these people, but, I mean, just look at the numbers here. 17 out of 20. All blue. This is one of the bluest charts there is. And yes, San Antonio and Las Vegas do go independent. And Jacksonville, Florida, as Republican run. But still, 17 out of 20 is pretty close. And that's not a statistic I would be putting out if I was trying to make that point. And even further when they go per capita. Just Springfield, Missouri is the only one that doesn't pop up with a blue on it. And yet, here they are, putting it out there. 19 out of 20 per capita. And you think this goes in your favor and goes against the president? I don't know. This is what the mainstream media is. This is what this show is competing against. The Washington Post, people. So, I can't with this. You can't make your opponent's own case, no matter how you try, and expect to keep winning. Alright, we got a big block of Daily Wire here. We've got such a big block of Daily Wire, I might have to start talking through my nose and really fast, because we have that much Daily Wire here to get to. But they actually, like I said in the beginning of the show, they actually did some sort of journalism, so I got to give them credit where it's due. They had an actual stack of good articles today, which I cannot always say because I check them every morning. But let's see what they had to say. Let's get right down the line here. Starting off, From Amanda Prestigiacomo, Alyssa Milano defends darkening face in years-old parody video. On Saturday, actress and left-wing activist Alyssa Milano defended a years-old parody wherein Milano darkens her face to look like reality TV star Nicole Snooki Polizzi of Jersey Shore fame. The right-wing trolls are still using a still from this Funny or Die video where a parodied Snooki from Jersey Shore. Milano posted on Saturday, if you see the screen grab that they're using, you can shut them down with a link to the entire video. Is she racist? Hashtag Alyssa Blackface, one critic posted in response to Milano, captioning a photo of the actress with the darkened face makeup from the 2013 Funny or Die sketch. This is me playing Snooki, Jersey Shore in a Funny or Die video, Milano responded, linking to the video. Hey, I've got one thing to say to this, alright, you guys? Think about this. One thing to say. Hashtag Guido Lives Matter, alright? You can't be racist against the Guidos, alright? Hashtag Guido Lives Matter. Make it spread. Polizzi, aka Snooki, was born in Chile and raised by Italian adoptive parents. The reality star identified as Chilean up until 2014 when DNA testing revealed her mixed ethnicities of Northern India, Gypsy, Iberian American, South Asian, East Asian, Middle Eastern, and Jewish, with roots in northwestern Croatia, Macedonia, Slovakia, Russia, and Spain, according to Newsmax. I would say once I was 16 and 17, I started to think, why don't my birth parents want me? What do they want? What do they look like? Do I have any brothers or sisters? Because I grew up an only child, I only wanted a brother or sister to grow up with, Polizzi said of her upbringing in a years-old video post, according to Page 6. I hate being an only child. It makes me a bit of bitch that I am today. That's why I want like 10 kids, so they don't feel that way, the reality star continued, adding, eventually, when I was 21, 22, I got my dad drunk and was like, Dad, can you just tell me what went on? Why was I up for adoption? I can't even imagine because I have 2 kids putting up a child for adoption to give them a better life, Polizzi said. That's so amazing for them. That shows how much they love me. But I could never do that. I can't even imagine how they felt giving me up. But thank you for that. So a lot of this is going back onto Polizzi's background here, but missing the actual point here of Milano came out and tried to get ahead of this. And I'm sure that nobody would have even noticed this one because Polizzi is considered by most to be European/white, even though she's got a deep tan. So nobody would ever even thought to look for this one, except for the fact that the GOP had come out and pointed the blackface. But now she's trying to get out ahead of this and trying to say, oh no, I didn't do the blackface. You don't have to cancel me, in the wake of everyone else being canceled. So, I don't know. It's going to come for everybody here. And you notice there are no mainstream conservatives, even in the pop culture, that are getting hit by this. It's all these Democrats. I listened to this, I was listening to Pooley. No, it wasn't Poole. It was Lauren Chen yesterday. And she pointed that out. And I started to think really hard. And I couldn't think of a single prominent conservative out there that has been picked up or suggested on this. You know, you had Northam. You had Tina Fey. You've got all these prominent either Hollywood types or Democrats that did this. But they want to say it's a GOP plot. So that's an interesting thing to watch out there. All right, let's keep going down the list here. From the Daily Wire again. Sacha Baron Cohen crashed pro-gun event posing as racist country singer before the crowd turned on him. This is from Paul Bois. Borat has struck again. Comedian Sacha Baron Cohen is up to his old tricks again. This time he crashed a gun rights event in Washington where he posed as a racist country singer, getting some of the crowd to sing along before they reportedly turned on him and security whisked him away. According to Variety, Cohen infiltrated the event, March for Our Rights 3, headed by the organization Washington 3 Percenters, a pro-gun rights group that has been widely described as an anti-government right-wing militia, to label the group Rejects, where he sang a racist song before the crowd after posing as a country musician. According to social media posts from the event's organizers, Baron Cohen disguised himself as the leader of a political action committee who wanted to sponsor the rally, reported Variety. He brought his own security team, who had prevented organizers from kicking him off stage once he began singing and turning off the power to his microphone. Once the actor took the stage, he performed a song while having members of the crowd repeat the overtly racist lyrics back to him. The song focused on injecting Obama, Clinton, and Fauci with the Wuhan flu and chopping up members of the WHO like the Saudis do. Obama, what we gonna do? Inject him with the Wuhan flu. Hillary Clinton, what we gonna do? Lock her up like we used to do. Fauci, don't know his head from his ass. He must be smoking grass. I ain't lying. It ain't no jokes. Corona is a liberal hoax. Dr. Fauci, what we gonna do? Inject him with the Wuhan flu. WHO, what are we gonna do? Chop him up like the Saudis do, Baron Cohen sang. Exactly what Baron Cohen was performing the prank for has not yet been confirmed. Really? Oh, yeah, no. Okay, I see what they were saying here. Speculation suggests it may have been for a Showtime program, Who is America, which lampooned people to the right of center. No, yeah, like I say, he was going out there trying to get these people to demonstrate how racist they really were behind closed doors by pretending to be one of them. I was going to say, it's not like they don't know what he was doing here. He was trying to get footage so he could go out and say, this is America. I like sex, it's very nice. Alright, couple more here from these guys. Venezuelan immigrant warns America of destroying statues. History. I am seeing the same pattern repeat. This has been circulating for quite a while. From the Daily Wire News. Venezuelan immigrant Elizabeth Rogliani warned Americans in a video to be on guard against destroying statues in history because Venezuelans did not take those issues seriously when they started happening in their country a couple decades ago before the nation was under the grip of a dictatorship. Rogliani has gained popularity in recent days after a different video of her talking about the issues went viral on social media last week, and she ended up making an appearance on Fox News' The Ingram Angle with host Laura Ingraham. I remember that statues of Christopher Columbus being knocked down. After that, the streets' names changed. Not all of them, but quite a few of them, Rogliani said. They changed the name of the national park in Caracas to something more indigenous. They changed the flag of our country. They also changed the name. They dismantled our police in 2001 and put in place a new one. They changed our voting system, so the way we voted changed. Why am I worried about statues coming down in the United States? Rogliani continued. It's because I'm seeing the same pattern repeat. And I'm not speaking to this as an expert on U.S. politics and U.S. history, but I can recognize the signs. And these are not isolated incidents. I've been hearing from people from Cuba, people that left the Soviet countries. I feel that they maybe the same thing is repeating, and the attack on history by first going after those symbols was the first way to do it. So, I mean, we've been talking about this since the beginning, since they first started talking about taking statues down. The first time 3 years ago when they first started talking about this is what they did in Soviet Russia before it became a dictatorship, what they did in Cuba before it became a dictatorship. To erase history is to control the future, and that's what they're looking at this point because they can't let people see a country that was successful for so many years under the free market, under the government getting their hands out of it. And that's what we want out of here. We want the government with their hands out of things. We don't want the government hands in every single thing that we do. But this is what they want to do. They want to see everything get torn down, so they can build it up in the way that they want it to be, rather than the way that the founders wanted it to be. So, absolutely, this is happening, and absolutely, this is something we need to pay attention to. Alright, I'm going to read just a little bit of this one here, because Matt Walsh tends to babble, but I like the idea of this here. Walsh, activists want Imagine to be our new anthem. It's the worst song ever written, from Matt Walsh. Okay, we're not going to read this one. Okay. Never mind. That's a Reader's Pass one. So, to go on to what Walsh was saying, because I heard this off on his show, though, however, they want Imagine to be our national anthem, which is funny because, and I pointed this out, how can you have a national anthem that has the words in it, Imagine there's no countries? That seems like a conflict of interest here, but Of course, because the national anthem that we have currently was written before we had eliminated slavery in this country, back when we were the evil slave owning nation out there. Now they need to get rid of it. And every other part of history. This goes right along with the statues thing that this young Venezuelan woman was telling us just a bit ago. That they're changing the history now to try and make it so they can rise to power and stay in power forever. And this is something we need to keep watch for. Absolutely. All right, next one here from the Daily Wire again. Never mind. This is a Reader's Pass one as well. I really should scroll down into these before I put them up on the list. I'm going to do a separate video on that one, because that is an interesting idea if Southern rock can survive the cancel culture. Alright, so let's move on here and talk about appeals court rules funding for Trump border wall construction unlawful. This is from NBC News. From Dara Gregorian, the Trump administration does not have the authority to use military funding to pay for construction of a border wall, a federal appeals court panel ruled on Friday. In a 2-1 ruling, the of course it's the Ninth Circuit. Why would it be anything but the Ninth Circuit? This is going to have to go to the Supreme Court, which means that we're not going to see it until after the election. Found that diverting $2.5 billion Congress had appropriated for military had violated the Constitution and is unlawful. The executive branch lacked independent constitutional authority to transfer the funds, the ruling said. These funds were appropriated for other purposes, and the transfer amounted to drawing the funds from the Treasury without the authorization by statute, and thus violating the Appropriations Clause. Therefore, the transfer of funds here was unlawful. The decision upheld a ruling by a federal judge in California who last year found that the Trump administration's funding scheme was against the law. A coalition of states led by California had filed suit to block the move. California Attorney General Javier Becerra praised the appeals court's ruling. Of course he did. Today, the court reminded the president once again that no one is above the law, Becerra said. We applaud the courts for taking action to immediately halt Trump's unlawful money grab. The Trump administration commandeered the military money last year after Congress refused to appropriate money for the wall. The president declared a national emergency at the border in order to access the money from the Pentagon. The U.S. District Court Judge Haywood Gilliam Jr. found the administration failed to provide the money or prove the money was needed for unforeseen military requirements. I don't know. Defending your own nation against invasions twice seems like a military requirement, but I don't know. I think logically. The appeals court agreed, noting the problem with drug smuggling at the border is a long-standing problem and not unanticipated or unexpected. So this is the Ninth Circuit, of course, because they went judge shopping for that circuit there to go out and block the wall once again, because they need to make sure that Trump is not getting anything that he wanted out of this administration. He wanted the great economy, they tore that down, and they're trying to do it again, so we'll be watching that closely. He wanted the wall. They've done everything they could to stand in front of this here. And a lot of this, and I'm looking through, this goes right into the next story, but I want to get this out here. A lot of this has nothing to do with Trump. You have to keep that in mind. I know a lot of people are coming out and saying that Trump is uniquely evil because he's Trump, because he womanized, because he did this, because he did that. He was racist. He was every other thing that they throw at the book of this. This is not a Trump problem. This is a Congress problem. And if you want to look at that, you need look no further than Dan Crenshaw, Jamal Bowman, and the squad. People are coming up right now after they had a freshman politician come up and make it to the presidency, and they're going out to try and oust and primary these high-profile, even some low-profile seats in the country. I guarantee you, had there not been a Trump, had this been a Bush presidency, because I don't think Hillary could have pulled it off against Bush. Had this been a Bush presidency after 8 years of Obama, you would not see an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You wouldn't see an Ilhan Omar. Well, there'd be Bush in office. An Ilhan Omar would be scared to be in office or be seen anywhere. You wouldn't see the Ayanna Pressley. You wouldn't see the Dan Crenshaw, though, either. You wouldn't see Jamal Bowman. You wouldn't see so many of these people jumping up in order to jump for seats that have been long held by 20, 30, 40-year incumbents. because they would have stood no chance of winning because the establishment would have been taken there. They're not trying to get rid of Trump or discredit his presidency right now because he's uniquely evil, because he's been on their side for many, many things. They're trying to tear him down right now because he made it hard for them to get reelected. He made it easy for people to come up and primary them after they've been sitting and doing nothing for 30 years. And I can see that. I can see the writing on the wall. It's not Trump. It's their power. And we're seeing this right now in the unrequited power grab that we're seeing coming up. All right. Let's keep going down on this. From Fox News, rough polling stretch has GOP operatives asking, could Trump drop out? No, I don't think his ego will let him drop out. Some GOP operatives are wondering if the president could drop out of the presidential race if his poll numbers don't improve. From Charlie Gasparino, Andrew O'Reilly, Lydia Moynihan over at Fox News. A stretch of lackluster polling for President Trump has some Republican operatives nervous about the president's re-election prospects in November, with some even floating the possibility for the first time that Trump could drop out if his poll numbers don't rebound. It's too early, but if the polls continue to worsen, you can see a scenario where he drops out, the GOP operative, who asked to remain anonymous, told Fox News. I've heard the talk, but I doubt it's true, another said. My bet is he drops if he believes there's no way to win. Trump's poll numbers in recent weeks have trended downward amid criticism over his administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the White House's response to the protests and riots following the death of George Floyd in late May, while in Minneapolis police custody. In recent Fox News poll, had the president trailing Democrat Joe Biden by 12 points, while a Real Clear Politics average of polls had Trump down almost 10 points to the former vice president. Biden also was leading Trump in many key battleground states, and polls from Republican strongholds such as Texas had Trump and Biden neck and neck. Yeah, there's no way. Not in Texas. Polls in the past, however, have been way off the mark. In 2016, Trump trailed Hillary Clinton in almost all the polls leading up to the general election before pulling off his surprise win. The president also already has weathered numerous controversies during his term in office and came away largely unscathed, at least among his base of supporters, according to analysts. The Trump campaign adamantly denied that president would drop out of the race and criticized polling for allegedly undersampling Republican voters. Fact check true. This is the granddaddy of fake news, Trump campaign spokesman Tim Murtaugh told Fox News. Everyone knows the media polling has always been wrong about President Trump. They undersample Republicans and don't screen for likely voters. In order to set false narratives, it won't work. There was similar fretting in 2016, and if it had been accurate, Hillary Clinton would be in the White House right now. After the latest spate of polls, his campaign released a memo on Sunday, essentially refuting the claims that the president's re-election chances were in trouble. The campaign cited polling that showed a lack of enthusiasm for Biden, especially in key battleground states, and called into question the methodology used in major polls. I've been surprised before, but there are a couple things that are going on here, of course, as we look at this. Now, one of the strategies that I looked at here is the fact that they put up Joe Biden. Now, think about what we did in 2016. Republicans thought that they were a massive underdog coming into 2016. Just this massive, major underdog. They thought there was no way that President Trump was going to win, and we were going to live under the presidency of Hillary Clinton. So they got out and voted like their lives depended on it, and just looking at the way the DNC has operated in the last 3 years, it quite possibly could have. They voted like their lives depended on it. And I look at the fact that Joe Biden is pretty much a corpse, and we're pretty much going to be voting for his vice presidential pick, which I think is why he hasn't picked a vice presidential pick yet, because he wants to make sure that we look into this with no fear. So his team is doing a lot of research into this. But think about Joe Biden, somebody that can't get up on the debate stage, can't get up there, can't debate, can't do all these kinds of things. It would be very easy to see some of that complacency come over Trump voters. Oh, he's running against Biden. There's no way that he could lose. I might not have to go out to the polls. It's hard to get out to the polls. I might not have to do that. No, they're manipulating you at this point. Between the polls and the fact that this guy's a doddering old idiot. They're manipulating you at this point. Now, I am not going to be voting for the president this year, and I've made this point blank clear. Because of the Patriot Act, and that was the killer for me for the presidency. I will not vote for somebody who would reauthorize the Patriot Act. It is not going to happen. 100% not going to happen. But he signed it, and I cannot get behind Joe Jorgensen, and the Green Party's just nuts. And I'm never going to vote for a Democrat again, especially in the direction that they're going. So I'm not voting for president this year, and there are a few of us like that as well. I know with the Patriot Act, we lost the libertarian wing that thought that their libertarian candidate was a joke. But yeah, there are a lot of other things that are going on with this, with the presidency, but for the most part, they are trying to breed some complacency out of this so people don't get up to go out and vote. So we will see what happens there, but I'm still pretty confident that Trump wins this. Even without my vote, I'm still pretty confident. Just looking at the general air of social media and the general solidness of his base, I'm generally confident that he's going to pull this off. But they're doing everything they can to try and prevent it. All right, I got one here from the New York Slimes, archived, of course. Russia secretly offered Afghan militants bounties to kill U.S. troops, intelligence says. From Charlie Savage, Eric Schmidt, and Michael Schwartz. American intelligence officials have concluded that a Russian military intelligence unit secretly offered bounties to Taliban-linked militants for killing coalition forces in Afghanistan, including targeting American troops amid the peace talks to end the long-running war there, according to officials briefed in the matter. The U.S. concluded months ago that the Russian unit, which has been linked to assassination attempts and other covert operations in Europe, intended to destabilize the West or take revenge on turncoats who had covertly offered rewards for successful attacks this year. Islamist militants or armed criminal elements closely associated with them are believed to have collected some bounty money, the official said. 20 Americans were killed in combat in Afghanistan in 2019, but it was not clear which killings were under suspicion. The intelligence finding was briefed to President Trump and the White House's National Security Council to discuss the problem at an interagency meeting in late March, the official said. Officials developed a menu of potential options, starting with making a diplomatic complaint to Moscow and demanding that it stop, along with escalating series of sanctions and other possible responses, but the White House has yet to authorize any step, officials said. Well, they're kind of busy cleaning their outhouse right now, so... An operation to incentivize the killing of American and other NATO troops would be a significant and provocative escalation of what American and Afghan officials have said is Russian support for the Taliban, and it would be the first time the Russian spy unit was known to have orchestrated attacks on Western troops. Any involvement with the Taliban that resulted in the deaths of American troops would also be a huge escalation of Russia's so-called hybrid war against the United States, a strategy of destabilizing adversaries through a combination of such tactics as cyber attacks, the spread of fake news, and covert and deniable military operations. The Kremlin had not been made aware of the accusations, said Dmitry Peskov, the press secretary for President Putin of Russia. If someone makes them, we'll respond, Mr. Peskov said. Zabihullah Mujahid, a spokesman for the Taliban, denied that the insurgents have any such relations with any intelligence agency and called the report an attempt to defame them. So, and of course, social media right now is actually trying to run out and say that Trump authorized these killings, that he was the one, that he had his hands in this. So, I mean, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at the presidency. They're preparing for Trump to win the presidency because they want to pull the Russian hoax out back again. No matter what happens, 2021 and going forward is going to be a really interesting year. You think 2020 was bad? There's going to be a lot of shit coming in 2021. So strap yourselves in, kids. All right, a couple more here, and then we will do something that restores my faith in humanity and head on out of here. Texas and Florida bar owners closing their doors a second time. Fear-crushing impacts from Christina McSorris. The Houston bar Scott Ripas co-owns has been open about 3 weeks before the governor shut down their business again in response to a surge in new coronavirus cases. In the short time, that they were open. Repass says the staff followed safety guidelines to a T. They required customers to wear masks when moving around. They offered hand sanitizer at the door. Bartenders and servers wore masks. Nobody congregated, and almost nobody used cash. But that didn't prove to be enough. Unsure of how long this second hit may last, Repass has now filed for unemployment, and he's not alone. Bar owners across the state and in other parts of the country were focused on a second shutdown, say they don't know what this time around may look like and whether they'll be able to survive it. In a news release on Friday announcing bars should close again, Governor Greg Abbott said it's clear that the rise in cases is largely driven by certain types of activities, including Texans congregating in bars. The move comes after bars were allowed to reopen on May 22nd under the state's second phase of reopening. Orders to close the bars in several U.S. hotspots come as some healthcare professionals have called crowded bar scenes across the country the perfect breeding ground for the virus. At least 85 people contracted coronavirus after visiting East Lansing, Michigan. Earlier this month, in Louisiana, health officials say they've received at least 100 reports of positive cases from people who visited or worked at Tigerland bars in Baton Rouge. At least one Idaho county moved back a stage in reopening, announcing bars and nightclubs would not be allowed to remain open after many of the state's new cases were associated with people who reported having a night out. And in California, the governor ordered bars closed in 7 counties on Sunday, days after saying an increase in cases was driven by young groups and gatherings. Round 2 for devastated Florida bars. When cases began surging across Florida, the Volstead Bar in downtown Jacksonville shut itself down to conduct another deep cleaning. The bar's marketing director, Hannah Ferguson, said, "All staff members were tested for the virus," she added, "and were cleared. We barely survived the first shutdown, and once we were allowed to reopen in phase 2, we're very strict about following all CDC guidelines," Ferguson said. "We've struggled with making ends meet, especially with all the rules that they've been put in place. And now they had no choice but to close their doors a second time after on-premise alcohol consumption was suspended in bars across Florida." Bars and nightclubs were ordered closed in mid-March as most counties in Florida encountered a second phase of reopening. On June 5th, bars were allowed to reopen, maintaining a 50% seating capacity inside. In an emergency order issued last week, the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation announced bars could still sell alcohol to go in sealed containers. The department said restaurants were allowed to continue serving alcohol. "All they did was flip the switch," said Paul Madrano, who owns 2 bars in Tampa. "So now you're going from a bar to a restaurant that acts like a bar. So you're not diminishing the people that might get infected because all they're doing is moving them to another location. None of this makes sense," Madrano says. And I can't believe they're going to do this here and get away. We do really need to look back and look and see what the death count is going to be in the next couple of weeks, because we are seeing, we're looking at a month right now of reopening, and we're not seeing the death tolls that they were telling us we were going to see. In Minnesota, which was a fairly hard-hit state, we're back to single digits on deaths. But cases are coming up, and people are recovering from them, and people have already had them. So I think this is overdone, but of course, these businesses are running on a very, very low margin to begin with. That's something that we've harped on constantly, all of us in the independent media. These restaurants and bars are running on a razor-thin margin to make sure that your prices stay low, and they can keep operating, and you'll still keep coming to them. You can still afford to keep coming to them. They're on a razor-thin margin, and they're going to shut them down again, putting the most vulnerable people in the world out of work. So I hope media, I hope you're happy with yourselves. In order to ensure that the evil orange man doesn't get reelected, you are going to hurt the most vulnerable people in this country with a smile on your face. Congratulations. All right. I'm going to try and read this. I tried to read this a bit earlier, but I threw up in my mouth while I was reading it. I'm going to try and read it again. But this is an opinion piece that's marked as an analysis by Stephen Collinson. As the pandemic rages, Trump indulges his obsessions. With the pandemic exploding and setting record infection rates, President Donald Trump spent the weekend on his own, often divisive obsessions, piling up new evidence for detractors who say he's not fit for office. The The president largely ignored the implications of the disastrous U.S. government response to the worst public health crisis in 100 years, even though it emerged late in Friday in CNN reporting that the White House is taking vigorous effects to protect him from the infection at rallies that contravene social distancing and masking guidelines, and that put even his own supporters at risk of getting sick. Trump did, however, find time to defend the statue of former President Andrew Jackson, who retired to his slave plantation in 1837, the evil of it, and to retweet a video in which a supporter chanted, "White Power." Trump denied reports that he was briefed that Russia offered a bounty to the killings of the U.S. and UK soldiers by the Taliban, but didn't say how he would respond and stand back up for American troops if the story was true. And Trump, who lambasted his predecessor Barack Obama for his less prolific golf hobby, made two trips to humanity to his Virginia course, despite boasting that he canceled a weekend trip to his New Jersey resort to make sure law and order is enforced on Washington, D.C. Trump's weekend represented yet another sign that he's moved on from a pandemic which has killed more than 125,000 Americans and threatens to claim tens of thousands more that he initially ignored, then mismanaged, and then politicized. And he's now grown tired of talking about his re-election fight looms. His negligence came despite his Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar delivering an alarming warning on CNN that appeared to contradict Vice President Mike Pence's claim of truly remarkable progress in the battle against coronavirus and false statements that the U.S. had flattened the curve. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this one anymore. This is propaganda in its highest point. I don't know why they don't just call CNN the propaganda wing of the DNC. I know, that's an old joke, but still, that's all this is. And there's a reason that I don't use them as a source for very much anymore. But, yeah. This, they're going to go down the Russia road again. Russia, racism, everything else they pulled out for the rest of the year. They've got to do something. Because they've got to make sure that the people that are in power stay in power. And don't get ousted by young upstarts. Alright, last one here. From Variety. I don't want to see your notifications, Variety. Family Guy star Mike Henry will no longer play Cleveland Brown. Mike Henry is exiting his role as Cleveland Brown on Family Guy. Is Family Guy still going? Henry made the announcement on Friday on Twitter. "It's been an honor to play Cleveland on Family Guy for 20 years, he wrote. "I love this character, but persons of color should play persons of color. Therefore, I'll be stepping down from the role." Henry has been with Family Guy since its first season in 1999. In addition to Cleveland, he also voices Consuela, a Latina maid, on the long-running animated series, in addition to numerous other minor characters. Henry also voiced Cleveland and his black stepson, Rollo Tubbs, in the spin-off series The Cleveland Show, which aired on Fox for 4 seasons from 2009 to 2013. He is now the latest white actor to announce that he will no longer voice a character of color on an animated show. Jenny Slate announced on Wednesday she would no longer play the biracial character Missy on the popular Netflix show Big Mouth. Not long after that, Kristen Bell announced she would be stepping down from her role as a biracial character in the upcoming Apple animated series Central Park. Back in January, Hank Azaria said he would no longer voice the Indian character Apu on The Simpsons. Calls for Azaria, who like Brown has voiced the character for decades, to stop playing Apu intensified in 2017 after comedian Hari Kondabolu released the documentary The Problem with Apu. The doc explored how people of South Asian descent felt about growing up with Apu as one of their only representatives on American television. So, at this point, I no longer have any desire to watch Family Guy, which I didn't really to begin with. It had got kind of SJW-y for a while, but yes, more and more of the SJW shows have been out there, have been going on saying, we want the power to go to the other people. It's just a pandering move at this point. I'm sorry. If you didn't have a problem with it to begin with, then why have a problem with it now? You're just doing it because it's popular. It's popular, and you're trying to stay rich, and trying to keep these people from coming to your door, to your gated community, and tearing your house down. Nothing more at this point. So that is going to be it for the news here, and I do apologize to the character of Cleveland Brown for the fact that you have to lose your voice and you have to be replaced by somebody else or get written off the show. That's the other thing that could be, but I hope he doesn't get written off the show because I liked the Cleveland character. I thought it was fun. And I liked the Cleveland show too. I really did. But I don't have the same respect for any of these people anymore now that they're willing to do this. Alright, and on that dark note here, now we've got to think of something that restores my faith in humanity. And it's been a hard week. It really has been, because they've been coming up and they've been trying their hardest to destroy everybody's faith in humanity. And I've been very, very close on the edge. But the thing that restores my faith in humanity is the federalism that we're seeing right now. Yes, we're seeing the coronavirus cases uptick. And the cases, not the deaths. We're talking about this. And I understand that Tony Evers has his hands full as well too right now without everything that's going on in Madison. But on top of all of that, my state, as of right now, hasn't done anything for lockdown. And people are being more respectful, more socially distant. I will give them that. I'm observing as we go out into the world. I'm seeing how people interact with each other. And they're doing it for themselves. They're protecting themselves rather than having the government come down and tell them to do that. And you are your own first line of defense. That's what I said right from the beginning. If you want to social distance, then social distance. Make sure that you stay. And if you want to wear the mask, then wear the mask yourself. But the requirements and the shutdowns are not coming to my state, because I know Evers would do it if he had the power to, but for the most part, we know in Wisconsin what it takes to keep us safe. We know how to keep ourselves safe, and we know how to be good to one another. So, the state of Wisconsin and its response to the second wave has restored my faith in humanity, and with any luck, we won't have to have any government intervention come in with it. And that's going to be the episode today. Make sure you tune in tonight at 5:30 Central Time for the final episode of Ed's World. It's the end of an era, and I'm pretty excited to see where this next chapter in my life goes. So go ahead and check us out. Otherwise, we will be back here tomorrow with more Contemporary. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.